Well, hello and welcome to this very overdue behind the scenes video. Overdue in multiple senses. One, I haven't made a behind the scenes video in a long time, and two, I've been wanting to make this specific exact behind the scenes video for years, and I've just never done it. So this is how my editing process actually occurs. I have just finished shooting a talking head, and until I do the rough edit, which is what I'm doing right now, I kind of can't do anything else, and I will explain why as we get further. I'm working on my desktop right now, so everything is going to be really big. And for me, I have a 43-inch monitor, which is enormous. And well, I should just jump into it. So let's start by making a new project. So we need to go to my current projects file on my T5 drive. I already have a folder called furnaces because that's what we're doing. So we're going to make a new thing, and I always give it a silly name, except I can't type. And then this is a fun bug I always deal with. I'm sure this is just a stupid thing. I don't know what I'm doing as far as saving window layouts every single time on this computer when I start a new project. The project bin is over there for some reason, so I just gotta drag it down over here and move that over. Oh, that was way too far. And yes, I know I'm sure there's something that can make that stop happening, but that's once you save the project and you reopen it, that doesn't happen again. So anyway, like I said, I have a huge monitor. Hopefully, I might crop in as I edit this, but you'll see that what I'm doing, I don't even know what I'm saying. Again, what I'm building up to is, you'll see once I drop the sequence here, I work with the timeline really, really small habitually because of how often I edited from my laptop, and there's just not enough space on the laptop screen to have any of your clips visible. So you'll see that everything is really tiny. Got ahead of myself. So first, I'm going to create two very basic bins, talking head and B-roll. Nothing is going to go in B-roll right now. And here is all the talking head files. It's these video clips and the audio. I'm going to select them all and import them. This takes just a moment. That happened really fast because I've started this over. So here's everything in the talking head bin. It's going to populate the thumbnails. So the very first thing that I'm doing is I have to sync the audio with the video. And this is a pro tip as far as how to use Adobe Premiere that I still find hilarious. That I don't know if I'm just lucky in that I can use this and people have other different weird circumstances, but I have never once bothered to clap for audio sync, because in Premiere, all you need to do is click one clip, control click the audio, right click, merge clips, and then you say you're going to merge based on audio and hit OK, and Premiere just does this little bit of magic, and then boom, here's a new clip, and you will notice it has put the audio and video together where they should be. And this always works exactly perfectly.
Size building over here.
So it's always perfect. So I don't understand why people don't just do that. Anyway, I'm looking at OBS to see if it's actually hearing the audio.
Ew, this is a clunky line.
It is not.
Now first, we're going to be talking about the typical forced air.
That's kind of the problem, isn't it? Can I get... It's probably because of how the sound is mapped through... Okay. Okay, you should be able to hear this. There should be now a separate audio track for this going on. Anyway, so that audio is perfectly synced. Let me just play a clip.
Now first, we're going to be talking about the typical
So, again, I don't really understand why anybody is doing manual sound syncing at this point, because the camera is recording a soundtrack. I've got another soundtrack going, and Premiere can very easily just go, hey, here's the whole thing. Anyway, so now the most tedious thing is I have to get the rest of my clips on the timeline with this audio because my camera cuts everything up into 6-minute clips. And where it gets really tedious is this is a break because I have only 30 minutes of runtime because I don't have a true video camera. So how do I manage that? Well, simple. I just do what I did before, merge the clips, wait for this magic to happen. Oh look, here it is with the clip hanging out there because that's where it should be. So then all that I do here is I just line that up with the audio clip below it. I'll just zoom in to make sure that they are actually aligned perfectly. I'll also just play any of it.
Modern technology, quite efficient.
So there you go, that's there. So then what I will do is just, actually I should have done that before I moved it. This is me being paranoid. So then all I need to do, what clip was that? 60. So I just need to grab 61, 62, 63, and apparently 64 was used. Okay, so here now is everything on the timeline correctly. And I'm going to unlink these two and get rid of this clip. And now I'm going to apply the audio processing that I did from the last video. How do I do that? Well, we go to Open Project and we say, here's EVSD Explained. It's the last video I just did. Oh look, here's the last project. And now I'm literally just going to go click on one of the main clips and select. Gotta hold Control in Premiere. Control C, come over here. Control V, boom, there they all are, exactly as they were the last time. And I just checked to make sure the order is the same because how they're stacked can affect the sounds. We've got hard limiter, de-reverb, graphic de-esser, hard de-reverb, graphic de-esser. Okay, the last thing I will do before I close this project is I will grab the end screen thing and just plop it down. And I would grab the credits, except I still am doing this in a stupid way. And I build these manually every time because I have not figured out the After Effects integration with the service I use, which actually creates all these names. So this gets done every time because, and I'll show you why, I cannot, this is basically breaking Premiere. That is, and I'm not lying, that is the reason why it's limited to 300 people, because this is not only just for timing, it's getting a little impractical, but this breaks Premiere's ability to know what the heck is happening. I cannot click on this text box and edit anything. You'll see that here it's highlighting the box, but I cannot click in it, it just breaks it. So I can't just edit this, I have to make this list every single time. It only takes like 3 minutes, so I'm not really wasting much time, but it still, I really need to redo how I do my credits, and it's been a thing that's on my to-do list forever, but I will not be copying this over because there is no point. So now that I have the audio as I want it, I'm just going to close this project. And then the last thing is, right now, this is one huge clip and it's only linked to this. So I'm going to hit C on the keyboard and cut these up. Very quick process. And then we just go through and we select each pair and link them. There might be a keyboard shortcut that I haven't learned, but again, I'm not trying, because I don't only video edit, I don't want to, that's not something that I'm trying to do. I really do like every part of the process. But anyway, because video editing is just one part of it, I'm not trying to go nuts perfecting my flow, getting all, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for efficiency. I'm not trying to master that. But now all these should be linked together, and they are. All right, so save that. So at this point, I'm ready to do the rough edit. As you can see, we have 54 or what does this end up being? 56, almost 57 minutes of actual footage. But this video should be something like 18 minutes long based upon my read of the script. So as you can see, a lot of mess ups occur. So now this actual part of the process, I don't know how much of it I'm going to show you because it's pretty boring and tedious at this point. This is me looking at the ceiling, by the way, to see if I'm roughly centered in that box. And you will notice that I never get it quite right. But now that all that is done, this next process, I run it at 2x, and I do actually have some keyboard shortcuts set up. So I will show you what those are real quick. If I just hit G on the keyboard, that cuts it. So now I have a cut here, and I can move forward. And if I hit G again, you get another cut. And if I hit H, it pulls that back. So when I am doing cuts, it's very, very quick like that because I just cut the end, play it through to the next one, and then hit GH, and then it's pulled back. So that is a huge time saver, and someone shared that trick with me on Twitter. So I used to be doing it in an incredibly stupid way where I would use the mouse for everything, and then I'd have to, well, here, I can just show you what I would do. I would basically like cut that out, and then I have to go here, delete that, then delete the void. And I was doing that all by hand. It was just so dumb. You should do things to, be at least somewhat efficient because this process takes a while. But anyway, now that everything is on the timeline and I've got the audio correct, I generally do not bother doing color correction at this point. I could, but the way Premiere handles it, and also the way I do the edit, I always keep the talking head just on V1. So when it comes time to me deciding to actually do the color correction that I want to do, it's just a matter of copy pasting it across the rest of the timeline, and it takes a second. So that's not something I'm worried about. But now, sit back, relax, and enjoy me editing this.
Hi. Winter heating season. Don't like.
Oh, and this is how I usually, to get my cuts precise, I'm clicking, using the arrow keys to move forward one frame at a time, wait for the first sound, move back, and then there's that GH real quick pullback.
Well, winter heating season is quickly approaching, in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, which means that many of us are firing up our heating systems for the first time in many months and hoping for the best. Have you ever wondered why your furnace makes the noises that it does? And how come it seems to work in distinct steps? What's a heat exchanger? Why do we need to be worried about carbon monoxide poisoning? Why do we use furnaces at all? Great questions, so great, I'm making a video to answer them.
And then I will usually pause it at the end, make that cut, and then move forward.
Now first, we are going to be talking about the typical forced air gas-fired North American.
Now you'll notice that it took like 3 false starts there, but I know that this line did not work right.
Winter months and air handler for the air conditioning system in the summer months.
Oh wait, no, it did work right.
That line, I don't think enunciation was all there, so we are re-recording it.
That's why. So generally, if I make that decision, I will just not bother with listening through to this one.
Now,
and again, there's a lot of false starts. In fact, and this is just the thing you get good at, I can see from the waveform, there are a bunch of false starts. So I'm going to look.
Every small in the last. Ew, this is a clunky line.
And then the other thing, this is bloopers. This is how bloopers happen.
Over here, constructed in the last.
This is probably not going to keep in the bloopers, but I will just cut it out.
Ew, this is a clunky line.
Okay, then I Control X that to cut it, and then I just throw it at the end. It did actually appear, right? That's when you zoom out like that, it can be hard to see. So I save that I save that blooper. I know I'm getting rid of all this stuff, so I'll just recollapse it. Zoom in again.
We'll be talking about the typical forced air. Now first, we're going to be talking about the typical forced air gas. No, don't like that either. Now first, we're going to be talking about the typical forced air gas-fired North American heating system in this video because that's what's common where I live and what I have access to. Pretty much every small to medium-sized building built over here. Nope, it's not liner note. Now first, we're going to be talking about.
Is that a worthy blooper?
Nope, that's not the line I wrote. Being built over here.
Oh no, that is pretty funny.
Pretty much every small to medium-sized building built over here. Nope, that's not the line I wrote.
By the way, if you aren't familiar with some of the keyboard keys, in a lot of video editing programs, this is not unique to Premiere. J, K, and L, those are the buttons I'm using to move through the timeline. So K is like play, pause, L is forward, J is reverse. And I'm bringing this up because YouTube uses those same keys when you're watching it on desktop. So you can hit K to pause, and if you hit L and J, they move forward and back 10 seconds. And I actually use that all the time when I'm watching YouTube, so fun fact. But here I hit K or L.
Now first,
It plays, and if I held L twice,
we're going to be talking about the typical forced air gas-fired.
it runs at two times speed. Anyway,
First, we're going to be
you can just see like, oh, restarted. So I can just,
we're going to be talking about the scene,
there's so many false starts.
which isn't helping.
Oh, what was I remarking?
Now I'm thinking about that while I film
Oh, this.
behind the scenes video for you. I'm self-conscious of the fact that I've committed to editing this behind the scenes video for you. So now I'm thinking about that while I film, which isn't helping.
Very meta.
Now first, we're going to be talking to answer them. Now first, we're going to be talking about the typical.
That cut feels a little wrong.
Now first.
It's not that.
Now first.
It might just be my button hitting the table. Let me shrink that by 1 frame. 1 frame actually does make a difference, by the way.
Now first, we're going to be that I'm making a video to answer them. Now first,
Oh no, see? Whatever I was hearing isn't there, so either I'm just hearing things or that made an improvement.
we're going to be talking about the typical forced air gas-fired North American heating system in this video because that's what's common where I live and what I have access to. Pretty much every small to medium-sized building over here constructed in the last half century or so in a winter climate has at least one of these providing it with heat. If you're used to a heating system with a central boiler and radiators, well, this ain't that. Those aren't exactly rare in North America, but are typically limited to older buildings that were constructed before we became addicted to air conditioning. Ever since central air conditioning became common, we've settled on ducted systems like this where a furnace acts as both the heat source for winter months and air handler for the air conditioner in the summer months.
Okay?
Let's start by asking what the basic job of the.
What was that? A good metric for should I save this for bloopers is does it make me laugh? And I realize my bar is quite low, but anyway, we're keeping this one. Oh, I am a goofy soul. I really am. That's why sometimes the comments I get about like your videos are getting too silly, they kind of hurt a little bit because I am silly. That's just who I am.
Let's start.
That's just weird. We're not going to say that.
Let's start by asking in the summer months. Let's start by asking what the basic job of the furnace is. You might say, well, obviously it's to provide heat for a living space. And you'd be right. But more specifically, its job is to safely release as much of the heat energy contained in a contained was a little weird, wasn't it? I bet it wasn't. As much of the heat energy contained in a contained was said a little weird, wasn't it? I bet it wasn't.
It wasn't. I do this all the time where I think that I said something weird and then I stop, but I know if I didn't need to stop, I could have just kept going. I thought I hit H.
Let's start by
Oh, weird.
asking what. Let's start by.
Oh, that cut. I could just tell by looking at it. I got to get rid of some frames.
Let's start by asking what the basic job of the furnace is. You say, well, obviously it's to provide heat for a living space. And you'd be right. But more specifically, its job is to safely release as much of the heat energy contained in a combustible fuel that it can into the living space and distribute it with the aid of a blower fan and ductwork. Nearly everything in the furnace is designed around safety, and its sequence of operations is performed specifically to prove the integrity and functionality of the. Nope. I didn't like how I said integrity, so we are starting over. Let's start by asking. Let's start by asking.
This is how it goes constantly. And by the way, I did want, since I haven't brought it up, what I was talking about was most people will edit with the video where it shows the actual clip on the timeline. But I am, like I said, I'm used to only having this tiny collapsed view on a laptop because basically I only had this much vertical space in the timeline to keep a crisp video going on. And because I still edit from my laptop from time to time, I've just committed to always having this very collapsed view. So it looks absurd with all this screen real estate, but it's just what I'm used to and I'm committed to it at this point. So yeah. Plus, personally, I've never felt that this adds any value to me. Because I mean, like B-roll would be a little different, but I do everything one step at a time. So the way that I edit, I do not see the value in having the clip actually visible to you on the timeline. So I never used it.
As both the heat source for winter months and air handler for the air conditioner in the summer months. Let's start by asking what the basic job of the furnace is. You might say, well, obviously it's to provide heat for a living space. And you'd be right. But more specifically, its job is to safely release as much of the heat energy contained in a combustible fuel that it can into the living space and distribute it with the aid of a blower fan and ductwork. Nearly everything in the furnace is designed around safety, and its sequence of operations is performed specifically to prove the integrity and functionality of each of its components before it allows itself to run. If it fails its own tests, it locks itself out and you'll need to call your local HVAC company. Better that than be dead.
I think I re-recorded this line.
Your local sounded really rough and weird.
Let me see if I agree with that.
If it fails its own tests, it locks itself out and you'll need to call your local HVAC.
Oh yeah, I was right. I said you're loco. Ooh. Call your loco HVAC company.
And record this line. Once again, I'm gonna record this line. Let's start by Let's
save some time. Is this the same line?
We'll go over that sequence of operations.
No. Okay, cool.
Let's start by asking summer months. Let's start by.
So you can see that I usually go back and check, is that cut actually decent? Now I know this line's fine.
HVAC company. Better that than be dead.
So, fine to move on.
We'll go over that sequence of operations as well as the components themselves shortly, but first, let's discuss why we use these things. They seem to invite a sort of bafflement in those who don't live in North America.
Okay, I think I re-recorded this.
We'll go over that.
Yes.
Excellent. But some models get even more than that. I don't like something about how I delivered that, so.
I don't normally leave these many notes for myself, and like I said, it's because I knew I was doing this.
We'll go over that sequence of operations as well as the components themselves shortly, but first, let's discuss why we use these things. They seem to invite a sort of bafflement in those who don't live in North America. If a boiler is what you're used to, well, that makes sense, but quite often I've run across folks who seem to think our furnaces are somehow inefficient machines. Not at all. These are incredibly efficient. This particular furnace is able to capture 96% of the heat energy in a fuel. That's excellent, but some models get even more than that.
Okay, coming up is a stupid joke sneeze, and the first thing I'm going to do is just watch those sneezes, because I think the 3 lines were all successful, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Even more than that. AFUE, or or
I think the last one was the best.
Is the AFUE, or which stands for annual.
Yep. So I'm just gonna not even bother with the other ones.
We call this the AFUE, or excellent, but some models get even more than that. We call this the AFUE, or which stands for Annual Fuel Utilization Efficiency. It's measured as a more or less yearly average to help account for the differences in efficiency at startup and shutdown. During a steady heating state, it's actually slightly higher. Being able to get 96% of the heat energy available in a fuel into a living space is tremendous, but even the worst natural gas furnaces on the market had at least an AFU of 80. A long time ago, I made a video specifically about the rationale behind burning fuel for space heating, but this is essentially it. Furnaces excel at burning fuel and capture nearly everything we can from it.
Hello.
That said, they're probably, and now though, back to this.
Okay, so I know that line went well.
That said, they're probably and hopefully on their way out as we move towards electrification. Now, we don't typically use electric resistive heating to heat entire homes because while electric heat is itself 100% efficient, electrical generation is not. And even if it were, the electrical requirements of resistive heat aren't practical on a large scale. But heat pumps are able to turn this math on its head. Since heat pumps, which are basically just air conditioners running in reverse, can move much more energy than they themselves consume, they're undoubtedly the future of home space heating. Even right now, with our majority fossil grid, they result in fewer carbon emissions than directly burning fuel because their efficiency can approach 500%, more than accounting for the losses in generation. But we'll save that topic and its current challenges for a video in the promise not too distant future.
I see what looks to be a number of false starts here, so we're going to check to see are there any funny bloopers, and then otherwise move on, because you can just look in this waveform. That's the same as that, same as that. It is actually, being able to look at the waveform and see patterns is a very valuable skill for this.
To this.
So I'm just really going to look at the ends to see were there any funny bloopers.
Endeavor, this human endeavor. That's self, or that's what happened. You can't second guess yourself, or that's what happened. Combustion. Much more immediately deadly combustion. Dang it.
Yeah, that'll work.
Of course, there's the much more immediate breathe. And of course, there's the much more immediately deadly combustion. Dang it.
Some of these, I will usually end up with more bloopers than I know what to do with because I just don't really know. I'd rather have too many at the end and cut them down than not have enough, which has happened. And then I've just needed to stretch the before part needed to stretch, move back the beginning of the blooper so that it includes more not blooper, just to fit the timing of the credit sequence.
Video in the I promise not too distant future.
Oh, we can get rid of all this.
For now, though, back to this. One of the things we've learned.
What was that?
No, carbon wasn't said right.
Oh, I just. I should have a camera on my face while I'm doing this. Oh boy, I promise I don't have any alcohol or any other substances in my system. I'm just delighted by how stupid I am.
No, carbon wasn't said right. Byproduct carbon monoxide.
Was it even wrong?
Deadly combustion. Byproduct carbon monoxide.
I was kind of said carbon.
Deadly combustion. Byproduct. Much more. And of course, there's the much more immediately deadly combustion byproduct carbon monoxide. No, carbon wasn't said right.
Oh boy. Hi, I am a very silly person. Okay, how many more? I remember this line. There were many takes.
For now.
What was that?
For now, though, back to this. One of the things we've learned. So generally.
Okay, so this is right. Part of why this line I took so many takes was because I didn't know if when I was imagining the line as I wrote it, this enthusiasm.
For now, though, back to this.
Was not in my head. And so I kept going back and forth of like, should I do that? Would that be funny or not?
For now, though, back to this.
Because going back to the B-roll discussion, not going back, kind of just starting it. I don't film any B-roll until I've done this part because I actually go through and listen to this and make lists of what B-roll I want to get. Because as I'm writing this, I have an idea of I have a storyboard in my head basically, but I don't storyboard anything formally. So until I've actually made the talking head and I can listen back to this and then actually just make a to-do list of get all these shots, then the video just kind of builds itself because I know what's in my head, or because I have this list of shots. They're all going to end up in the video somewhere. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But it helps that I'm the one doing this from beginning to end. But so this, and now back to this, but first back to this, whatever it is, would have the B-roll shot of the furnace itself. So a hard cut to it, and then fade back to my talking head. So part of me was like, is this enthusiasm even going to work? And so I just decided to commit
Not
to it.
too distant future. For now, though, back to this. One of the things we've learned over the years as we've embarked on this human endeavor:
And we know that this line was successful, so I'm just going to skip
cells
through it.
than oxygen, which is bad.
Okay.
So generally, we shouldn't burn. But more on that later. We shouldn't.
Oh, this is definitely, I think, got retaken it.
Okay, so that line, note to myself, I diverged from what was written a lot. So I'm going to re-record it.
Okay, that's why.
So generally, we shouldn't. So generally, we shouldn't burn things indoors. And yet, here's a device which burns things indoors. But this particular furnace is a condensing furnace, and thanks to these two pipes here, the combustion of the fuel sort of happens outside. But more on that later. You may also know of a certain other device which does burn fuel indoors without ventilation, the common stovetop and oven. And research is beginning to suggest that maybe this isn't so great either. But there is the small saving grace that the quantities of fuel burned for cooking are generally small fractions of that which a furnace uses. And also, there are ways to mitigate this through ventilation, but I digress.
Oh, here's a fun little behind the scenes perk. I did change, I changed the wording a little bit. Here, I'll just watch it.
Okay, I did change a word. I need to make sure that that makes sense. A furnace uses small quantities of fuel burned for cooking are generally small fractions of that which a furnace uses. That works. Okay.
I think the original line was a furnace does, and as I was reading it, I was like, I bet uses probably sounds better. And then I was second guessing myself. So that's what that was.
A furnace like this needs to burn its heating fuel. Anyway, a furnace like this needs to burn its heating fuel and then has a bit of an exhausting job ahead of itself. Exhausting.
I know there are multiple takes of this.
Takes the form of a series of tubes. Anyway, a furnace like this needs to burn its process to make their way outside where they'll shoot. Anyway, a furnace like this needs to burn its heating fuel and then it has a bit of an exhausting job ahead of itself. Exhausting. We want the byproducts of the combustion process to make their way outside where they'll only be problematic in about a decade or two, but of course we want to be able to extract the heat generated by the combustion process and release that into the living space. We can do that with a heat exchanger. In a typical furnace, this takes the form of a series of tubes.
That glance at my fake watch, I was like, am I going to commit to that? And I did.
Series of tubes.
And this, I know there's a ton of false starts here, so we're going to look through. You could just, this is actually though.
Actually, though.
Yep. So all this is the same line said over and over and over again because I couldn't commit to it. So again, we're going to look for bloopers.
Through the furnace with the aid of a blower motor. Blower motor. That's the blower motor. Blower motor is stressing the wrong thing.
Is that worthy of bloopers?
Through the furnace with the aid of a blower motor. Blower motor. That's with the blower motor. Blower motor is stressing the wrong thing.
I'll cut it out just in case I need it. When I'm making a decision like that, I'll just
Blower motor.
not being very sloppy about the cut. It doesn't need to be precise whatsoever. That was too far. Okay, so
Standard 80 plus furnace is simply some number of typically U-shaped steel tubes. You might call them U-tubes. The fuel is burnt inside these tubes, which of course makes them get pretty freaking hot. Those tubes that are put in the...
oh, that's the
like that?
oh, that's the old one.
Actually, though, the heat exchanger in a standard 80 series of tubes. Actually, though, the heat exchanger in a standard. Do I like that? Series of tubes. Actually, though.
That's what's going through my head as I'm doing this. I remember that the old line was series of tubes. How am I going to phrase the actually though, which is in response to that, and not sure how I want to do that.
No, actually.
And that was me changing it up, which I believe I then decided I did not like.
The heat exchanger in a standard 80 plus furnace is simply some number of typically U-shaped steel tubes. You might call them U-tubes. The fuel is burned inside these tubes, which of course makes them get pretty freaking hot. Those tubes then are put in the path of the air being forced through the furnace with the aid of a blower motor, and that air keeps the heat exchanger from melting by cooling the tubes down, which also incidentally heats the air. That's a nice bonus. The practical upshot of this is that the heat from the fuel gets released into the air flowing through the furnace and eventually out of the vents which heat your home, but the combustion byproduct stays separated inside those tubes.
Why didn't I like that take?
No, actually. Actually, though, the heat exchanger in a...
I don't know, but I'm not gonna second guess myself now. The work that I set myself up for, which every single time I do, I would like to slap past me in the face, is decide between these two lines. Which one do you like better? Because I can never make that decision easily, and it's always fine. I never ever needed to re-record it. So when I've done this to myself, I just say, ignore this previous one. You didn't like it. Assume there's something wrong with it.
Actually,
Gotta get rid of this little guy too.
series of tubes. Actually, though, the heat
Oh, let's just see how that went.
tubes. This takes the form of a series of tubes. Actually, though, the heat exchanger in a standard 80 plus.
Look, there's more.
This is why it only heats the air. That's a nice book. Actually, though,
Is this still bad?
and of course we quibble over that. Actually, though, this takes the form of a series of tubes. Actually, though, the heat
Okay, good. That's a better delivery anyway.
exchanger in a standard 80 plus furnace is simply some number of typically U-shaped steel tubes. You might call them U-tubes. The fuel is burned inside these tubes, which of course makes them get pretty freaking hot. Those tubes then are put in the path of air being forced through the furnace with the aid of a blower motor. And that air keeps the heat exchanger from melting by cooling the tubes down, which also incidentally heats the air. That's a nice bonus. The practical upshot of this is that the heat from the fuel gets released into the air flowing through the furnace and eventually out of the vents which heat your home, but the combustion byproduct stays separated inside those tubes. Quibble over that. I'm not going to quibble over that.
I don't know what I was quibbling over, but I'm not quibbling over it, so good.
And of course, we need those byproducts to go away somehow. Okay, now we're checking the camera.
Checking the camera because it stops after
only
30
21
minutes.
We're doing better than Hunt. Somehow. And also, to burn fuels. Creaky chair.
That happens a lot.
And of course, and also, hang on. And of course, we need those byproducts to go away somehow. And also, hang on, you need oxygen to burn fuels, and the burning of the fuel consumes that oxygen. So you're gonna need a way to supply those tubes with fresh air, in addition to getting rid of the byproducts. Aha! Now we're getting into the more practical and safety bits of the furnace. If you've ever lived with a furnace like this, you'll likely have noticed that there are two blower motors. There's the big one that makes air come out of your registers, but before that one comes on, you hear another one. What's that for? What's that for? And of course, we need those byproducts to go away somehow.
Well, what?
Those tubes. And of course, we need.
Oh, great. I re-recorded it. All right. Why?
And also, hang on. Well, that's arguably.
Again, I'm not going to bother comparing. I re-recorded it for a reason.
Separated inside those tubes. And of course, we need those byproducts to.
Why has that cut?
Products stay separated inside those tubes. And of course, we need those byproducts to go away somehow. And also, hang on, you need oxygen. What's that for? Well, that's arguably gases through the important part of the furnace. That's arguably the most important part of the furnace. Through the heat exchanger.
Well, how's this line start?
Well, that's arguably.
Okay.
And what lives on the other side of those tubes are the flamethrowers.
Oh, yeah. I didn't accent flamethrowers well enough. That's why I didn't like that.
Well, that's arguably the. And of course, we need those byproducts. What's that for? Well, that's arguably the most important part of the furnace. This blower is called the draft inducer, and really it's more of a sucker. It pulls air and later other fun gases through the heat exchanger. In other words, it induces a draft. That air then gets inside of those tubes are the flamethrowers. Now we're getting to the Bernie business.
I'll remember this line. It had a number of takes.
Outdoors.
Which is weird because it seems like that went right the first time.
Something felt wrong about that, so I'm going to re-record it.
Okay. Okay, past me, I believe you.
Now we're getting to the Bernie business. Oh.
Well, that's not a good sign. What happened?
Comes out the other side of the heat exchanger's tubes. Don't make it. Oh. Wrong word. also that what comes out the other side of the heat exchange. Wrong word.
There you go. Sort of stuff that happens. I'm a professional.
Comes from the burners. These are essential. Now we're getting to the burning.
There's like something here. Hang on.
If we're burning a fuel,
Okay, got some cleanup to do. I try not to let these gaps appear, but apparently I did. Is this still now we're getting to the burning business?
now we're getting
Yes, okay.
to the burning business. As far as your furnace is concerned, here. Now we're getting to the burning business. If we're flamethrowers, now we're getting to the burning business. If we're burning fuel, it's not from somewhere. It's deeper, having been trapped there for millennia. But as far as your furnace is concerned, it comes from the burners. These are essentially just specialized nozzles which release some amount of gas into the heat exchanger's tubes. Thanks to the constant supply of fresh air brought about by the draft inducer, it will burn quite nicely. The draft inducer ensures not only that there is fresh air for burning, but also that what comes out the other side of the heat exchanger tubes doesn't make it into the living space. No, I hesitate about other thing before the lines will begin.
What was that?
No, I hesitated about another thing before the lines will begin.
Wow. I would put that in the bloopers, but I don't even know what I'm saying.
I hesitated about another thing before the lines will do it again.
I hesitated about another thing before the line, so we'll do it again, I think.
Now we're getting... It's got to come from somewhere. And where it comes from...
Hang on, is this...
Because this device deals...
Okay, good.
Now we're getting...
We found the line.
Now we're getting to the Bernie business. That's arguably the most important part that up here are the flamethrowers. Now we're getting to the Bernie business. This doesn't make it into the living space and is instead safely expelled outdoors.
Oh, you know what? Hang on. That cut's probably a little too soon.
In closed spaces. Because this device deals with the frankly dangerous combination. No, I didn't like that at all. because this device, this is hard. Because this device deals with the frankly the carbon monoxide and other icky stuff. That water vapor is
Okay.
monoxide and other icky stuff. But that water. Well, now we're gonna.
Okay, this gap is when I had to restart the camera, so I wanted to see if this line worked.
Out of the help FARC. Lost gases further, which helps gets more heat out of the help FARC.
We'll cut that out.
With a great.
Okay, I thought, sort of in the back of my mind, that that's how that went. So get rid of all that.
After the main fire tubes. That was fortuitous.
Oh, right.
Hot.
What?
More importantly, hot. But that water vapor is. It releases that energy.
The number of times I've seen myself freeze and then snap like that,
That energy.
that's apparently a tick that I have of some kind.
But that water vapor is. But that water vapor is carbon monoxide and other icky stuff. But that water vapor is hot and, more importantly, holds energy in the form of latent heat. When it condenses into a liquid, as it will inevitably do, that's all the steam you see coming from the rooftops of homes in the dead of winter. Well, it releases that energy. But that's no good if it's just happening outside. If we could make that condense inside, we'd be able to get more energy out of the heating fuel. And so a condensing furnace like this has... No, don't add words, you silly goof. But that water vapor is hot and, more importantly, holds energy in the form of latent heat. When it condenses into a liquid... I'm about to click there. But that heat, when it can, But that water vapor is hot, and more importantly, holds energy in the form of latent heat. When it condenses into a liquid, as it will inevitably do, that's all the steam you see coming from the rooftops of homes in the dead of winter, it releases that energy. But that's no good if it's just happening outside. If we can make it condense inside, we'd be able to get more energy out of the heating fuel. And so a condensing furnace has what is essentially a second heat exchanger after the main fire tubes with a greater surface area that can cool the exhaust gases further, which helps get more heat out of the fuel all by itself. But more importantly, it gets most of the water vapor to condense and release its latent heat inside the furnace, rather than to outside air where it is otherwise wasted.
Successful.
That's how this furnace is able to get 96%. Furnace is a little more complicated.
Okay.
And it's also how it's able to exhaust.
This line apparently went fine because
That's how this furnace is able to get 96% of the energy available in the fuel into the home. And it's also how it's able to exhaust through a PVC pipe. I mean, think about this. It's burning flammable gas. There's literal fire inside of it, and it outputs 70,000 BTUs, or about 20 kilowatts of heat. And yet, it loses so little of that heat in the exhaust that it can safely exit through a plastic pipe, which barely gets warm at all. Compare that to an 80-plus furnace with a steel exhaust chimney that gets so hot you can't even touch it, and you'll understand why condensing furnaces are a big deal and a great idea.
okay.
A condensing furnace is a little more... A condensing furnace...
Yeah, I remember this line took some multiple tries.
For one, well, now you have to deal with it when previously... No, water, it's pretty...
Yeah, boring.
Condensate isn't the easiest task. Most of that has to do with... A condensing furnace is with the fact... Most of that...
Okay.
A condensing furnace is a little more complicated.
Oh, hang on.
And a great idea. A condensing furnace is a little more complicated, of course, than a conventional one. Most of that has to do with the fact that dealing with the condensate isn't the easiest task. For one, well, now you have to deal with it when previously you didn't. This furnace has a drain pipe on its side for that very reason. But also, that water isn't just plain water. It's pretty acidic thanks to other combustion byproducts, so the secondary heat exchanger needs to be made of materials such as stainless steel, which resist corrosion. This adds somewhat to the cost of the furnace, but getting an extra 10 or 15% of the energy out of your heating fuel makes it, to my mind, obviously worth it, and we absolutely should find ways to help subsidize the added cost for those who need financial assistance, because in the long run, it will always save money and resources. It's frankly a no-brainer at this point. Oh, and that other pipe there? Well, here's another way to get an increase in efficiency.
Did I?
Of course,
No. Wow. See, the frustrating thing about my talking head sessions is that there will be like 3 or 4 lines in a row that just work great on one go.
Oh, and that other pipe point. Oh, and that other pipe there? Well, here's another way to get an increase in efficiency. This furnace gets its oxygen supply from outside. This pipe is simply supplying the combustion section with outside air. In fact, you can see that it just opens to this space, and the other end is outside. Why do that? Well, a conventional furnace gets its combustion air from the room it's sitting in. That means it creates negative pressure whenever the draft inducer is running, and that brings in some amount of cold outside air to replace what leaves through the exhaust. In contrast, this supply pipe, along with the seals in this panel, makes it so that the combustion section of the furnace is essentially entirely outdoors, creating no negative pressure at all. Particularly right now in the human experience, we're just...
Well, false start there.
Of course, particularly right now in the human... Let's finally bring it back to...
Okay, cool. Another line that just worked.
But anyway...
That's probably a little...
Let's finally bring it back. Since this furnace is quite...
This is one of those cuts that like actually happened in almost real time. And if you've been an eagle-eyed starer at the lava lamps when they're visible, it's the few rare times when they actually don't really move from one cut to the next.
But anyway,
because I'm just cutting out the breath here.
Let's finally pay attention and study. But anyway, let's finally...
I'm going to shorten this a couple frames.
But anyway, let's finally bring it back to the start with one of the questions I asked. Why does the furnace seem to do things in distinct steps? Well, that's all about that. Since this furnace is and a sequence of operations.
See that little thing I did? I finally stopped myself from blinking at the end of lines, but I'm still working on don't do that thing and then your dimples show up.
This furnace is quite modern. Since this furnace is quite modern, we have a circuit board with... Now, this component absolutely must... Since this furnace is modern... Since this furnace is... Operations. Since this furnace is quite modern, we have a circuit board with a microprocessor handling everything, but the same basic things have been happening in forced air furnaces for decades. When the thermostat calls for heat, the sequence of operations begins by turning on the draft inducer. Now, this component absolutely must be functioning properly for the safe operation of the furnace. If it opened the gas valve without airflow through the heat exchanger, it would be a disaster. So, to prove that the
Oh yeah, the line was not, it would be a disaster, it could be a disaster. I didn't want people thinking like, oh no, your furnace, one thing can fail and then it's gonna blow up. So I was like, no, I didn't write the line that way. Why did you read it that way? And I decided to rewrite. I know this happened in my head because this happened just a couple hours ago, so I'm cheating and saving myself some work.
Since this furnace is quite modern, we have a circuit board with a microprocessor handling everything, but the same basic things have been happening in forced air furnaces for decades. When the thermostat calls for heat, the sequence of operations begins by turning on the draft inducer. Now, this component absolutely must be functioning properly for the safe operation of the furnace. If it opened the gas valve without airflow through the heat exchanger, it could be a disaster. So, to prove that the inducer is actually functional, the circuit board looks for the output from this pressure switch to change. If it did, that means there was a change in air pressure where the switch is located, which would only occur if the draft inducer is working. Looking for a change in switch output also allows the furnace's logic board to detect a stuck switch and refuse to operate.
Okay.
Once the operation of the draft inducer is proven, good lord. Once the operation of the draft inducer has been proven, there will be a pre-programmed delay period to ensure no unburnt gases remain in the heat exchanger. Assuming the furnace shut down correctly, there shouldn't be any, but better safe than sorry. While that delay is happening, this furnace sends power to the hot surface igniter. This is an igniter that ignites the fuel by being a surface which is hot. An alternative method of ignition is a sparky thing, but that seems to have gone out of fashion for some reason. Anyway, because it takes a while for the hot surface igniter to become hot enough that its surface can ignite things, the delay period for clearing the heat exchanger is a perfect time to it up. Next comes the opening of the gas valve. Next comes the
Yeah, I remember this.
by flames
Why did I re-record it?
sensor to detect a rapid rise in heat brought about by flames.
I think it was that. I didn't like how I said flames the first time, but I like that.
It could potentially go boom. And this is actually easy to do. We just use a thermocouple and a flame sensor to detect a rapid rise in heat brought about by flames. Oh shoot. I was thinking about thermocouple. A thermocouple.
I don't know why I didn't like the first take. I remember there was a reason.
The opening of Next comes the
Yeah, and so all this, a ton of false
furnace. Next comes the opening.
I didn't like this.
We just use a thermocouple and a flame as
Yeah, let's keep that. I have more than enough bloopers, so I probably won't keep that one, but you never know. But now I gotta find, because all this is wrong.
Next comes the opening of the gap. Comes the opening.
Okay, so we're getting rid of all you.
Next comes the opening of the gas valve. This is a very time-sensitive step. Next comes the opening of the gas valve. This is a very time-sensitive step because natural gas and propane, which is actually what fuels this furnace, I'm really in the middle of nowhere, can be explosive. We don't want that, so we need a way to know that the fuel has actually ignited and isn't just being dumped into the heat exchanger unburnt, where it could potentially go boom. And this is actually really easy to do. We just use a thermocouple as a flame sensor to detect a rapid rise in heat brought about by flames.
Yeah, that's how I wanted that to be said.
And this is done quite cleverly. And this is done quite... And this is...
Yeah, there's a bad voice crack there.
And this is... And this is done quite...
Oh, I can already see.
The burners are designed... Oh, I don't like what's going on here. We're gonna... And this is done out by flames. And this is done quite cleverly. This furnace, like, closes the gas valve and aborts its mission.
Hello.
This checking for flame step is so quick because if any of the burners fail, so long as the flame sense...
Okay. Oh.
this checking for flame step is so quick because if any of the burners fail to ignite right away, they'll be pumping unburned fuel into the heat exchanger. If that's allowed to happen for more than just a couple of seconds, a dangerous quantity of fuel may now exist in the heat exchanger, which, if it were to ignite, would be likely to damage it. And that's very bad and also dangerous. So, if it doesn't see flames right away, that gas valve is closed again and the draft inducer remains running to clear the unburnt fuel from the heat exchanger. After a pre-programmed period of time, the furnace will make another ignition attempt. And after a certain number of failed attempts, it's 5 in the case of this furnace, the system locks itself out and no heat for you. At least for about an hour. This furnace and many others will try again later because there could be all sorts of reasons for failed ignition events, including temporary loss of gas pressure, so it does self-reset to keep pipes from freezing if it can help it. As the flame sensor sensed flames, though, now there's at least one other.
Almost at the end.
So long as the flame sensor sensed flames, though, your pipes from freezing if it can help it.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to zoom.
If it can help it. So long as the flame sensor sensed flames, though, which is to wait a little bit. Rather than start the blower motor right away and give you a nice blast of cold air, the furnace will simply sit pretty and allow the heat exchanger to get a little hot before it switches on the blower. But once it does that, well, now you've got heat coming from your heat vents. When the thermostat is satisfied and it stops calling for heat, the gas valve closes, extinguishing the flames, and the inducer fan remains running for 30 seconds or so to make sure all the remaining exhaust is replaced by fresh air. At the same time, the blower motor keeps running to cool off the heat exchanger and, of course, get the rest of the heat it contains out of it. But after about a minute, it shuts down completely and patiently waits for the next call for heat. Now there's going to be at least one. So there's a.
Okay.
And its design, oops,
Is that funny?
at a certain temperature. And its design, oops,
No, not enough.
now there's going to be at least one other safety device in the furnace too, and that would be a limit switch. This is a switch which trips at a certain temperature, and it's designed to.
Oh, I know there's another.
So there's a lot.
Oh no, sorry, lost track. I've recorded that twice already. I did the first one.
So that limit switch is there to detect such a scenario and shut down the furnace if it occurs. So there's a lot of safety built in. So there's clearly a lot of safety. Dangerous kind is a crack in the heat exchanger. So there.
Oh, weird. Okay.
So there's clearly a lot of safety.
I can already tell there's a gap.
Carbon monoxide. I stopped. So there's clearly a lot of safety built into. This is why it.
Okay, cool. I thought that was the same.
So there's clearly a lot of safety built into your typical furnace, and some clever ingenuity too. But there's one thing it generally won't guard you from, and that's carbon monoxide poisoning. If everything is in working order, that shouldn't be possible, but, well, whenever you burn fuel, there's a risk of carbon monoxide. Furnaces can be particularly tricky because the heat exchanger wears out with time. Going from room temperature to having fire inside of it and back a dozen times per day for 15 years is hard on it, and over time, imperfections can form from this thermal stress. The most dangerous kind is a crack in the heat exchanger's tubes, which can allow exhaust gases, and thus carbon monoxide, to exit the heat exchanger and make it into the living space. This is why it is vitally important. They may just save your life.
Okay, this is an editorial change that I made on the fly because the way that I wrote this almost made it seem like that a furnace or other heating system is the only thing that could produce carbon monoxide. And I realized that, so I had to re-record this line while adding in a sentence basically to fix that omission, to fix that error.
This is why it is vitally important that you have carbon.
I think the phrasing I added was like, even if it's not a furnace, just anything that burns fuel, something like that.
This is why it is vitally important that you have carbon monoxide alarms in your living spaces, and especially in your bedrooms. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a rare thing, but an alarm is the only thing that can guard you against it. Annual furnace inspections by a trained technician may be able to catch problems before they become dangerous, but accessing the heat exchanger for a thorough inspection can be difficult, and might not be performed in your typical pre-season tune-up special. So please, if your home is heated by combusting fuel, even if it's not a forced air furnace but instead something like a boiler, or indeed, even if fuel is burned anywhere in your home for cooking or water heating or anything, invest in carbon monoxide alarms and test them regularly. They may just save your life.
Yeah. That's the thing I added, so.
So that's how your typical North American forced air furnace.
Oh yeah, I forgot gas-fired. I like the clunkiness of North American gas-fired forced air furnace.
So that's how your typical North American gas-fired forced air furnace works. So So that's how you ask that. What? So that's how to save your life. So that's how your typical North American gas-fired forced air furnace works. It's really pretty simple, but thanks to modern technology, quite efficient too. On that note, condensing heat exchangers aren't limited by any means to forced air furnaces. Boilers can take advantage of this tech, even water heaters. So long as natural gas or other fuel combustion remains a prominent form of space and water heating, we really ought to do it as efficiently as we can. However, as we move headfirst into this decade, all right, we've recorded the talking head. So now I'm going to stop the camera.
Well, except I gotta cut this line out.
However, as we move headfirst into this decade, we'll undoubtedly start to see natural gas become phased out in more and more places. In areas with mild heating needs, heat pumps are already viable with a little more investment than air conditioner. And for colder climates like mine, geothermal heat pump systems are available and are dropping in price fast. But we'll get into those weeds maybe in a month or two, perhaps 3. It will be this heating season. I've got a thermal cam now, and there's a reversible mini split in the garage, so no excuses. Okay, bye.
All right, so this is we don't need to watch that. I don't know why I even said that, but this is the process. So apparently the runtime is 20 minutes. I always underestimate that a little bit. So it took, based on my time, and this is pretty much how it goes. It takes about an hour to do the rough edit. So this is the very first step of the editing process because I need to know timing and pacing before I can get a sense of what I need to film for B-roll. And then I do the cropping between cuts if they're, I do it for every single cut. And that will all come in the next couple of days. This part is the easiest part by far. Filming B-roll is the most tedious part by far. I'm not going to do it tonight, but what I would do, and I'll do it first thing tomorrow, is start listening to this while I have the Google Doc open of the script, and I just start typing out every thought that comes to my head of, oh, this is something that I should have on screen. I put that on the needed B-roll list, and then I'll go through that list and consolidate it and see put it in an order that makes sense to actually film. Then I film it, and often that is an all-day thing. Whatever day whatever video I'm working on, the B-roll filming is an all-day affair. I will actually save this. Good idea, Premiere. And then the editing of the B-roll into the timeline can, depending on the video, this video will probably be fairly simple. I might even be able to do the filming and editing the same day because what I need to film is basically just the furnace. It's going to be a little tedious because I need it to run through its sequence of operations, so I'm going to be starting and stopping it a lot. And just that takes time, but yeah, so that's how this goes. You've been watching for like an hour, assuming I didn't edit this down, but this is how I edit, so I don't know if is it right to edit the editing process? I don't know. But my sniffles are just allergies. It's unfortunately a constant battle for me, especially because now it's harvest season and there's a lot of farms around here and people are harvesting their corn. So it's going to be rough until the first hard frost. Anyway, thank you for watching this behind the scenes video. I hope it was enjoyable. As I said, this is something I've been wanting to do forever. And it's going to be very lightly edited as far as maybe zooming this around. So apologies if it was hard for you to see. I might, you know what, I'll probably, now that I think about it, I'll probably do like a picture-in-picture type thing. I can make that work. But anyway, for now, let's stop OBS. Oh, great. Now you can't see anything. That wasn't smart. Okay, well, thanks for watching.